Welcome back to my channel, guys. Okay, Gary is on me. I always feel embarrassed to say this, but please subscribe to my channel and like and leave us a comment. All of this really does a lot to help bump our channel up and honestly to help put food on the table. So let's go ahead and get started. This mom mug is gorgeous. These TIPSY Magnolia mugs are so fun to work with. We're going to go ahead and remove the top because we don't need that. The bottoms, you can go ahead and take that off. I have a little mallet. I thunk it 2 times and it pops right up. I keep that lid because I use it for paint and everything. It's a little crazy. I spray painted my tumbler with flat white spray paint and I let that dry completely. We're going to apply this glitter tack it method, and the glue that we're using is, the brand is Aleene's, and I think the one in my hand is foiling glue, but tack it over and over and foiling glue is pretty much the same thing. I think that the foiling glue is a little stronger. So I'm going to go ahead and put it right on my tumbler and brush it in really well. Some people do water this down. I just apply it straight to my tumbler and usually it works out pretty good. For some reason today, I think I was taking a little longer on the handle, making sure I didn't miss any places, that some of the glue started to dry on me. You can feel when it starts to dry because your paintbrush, instead of just gliding over it, it'll kind of get a little grabby. If that happens, go ahead and get your paintbrush, dip it in just a tiny little bit of water, and that will help to thin it just a little and give you a little more of a work time. Once you get that on there and everything's coated, hit it with the heat gun very gently. Like I said, this glue is never going to dry. It's just going to go to a tacky consistency. So once you get that done and everything, like I said, it doesn't take long at all. I mean, I just hit it for 1 rotation. Go ahead and drop your glitter. The glitter that I'm using for this is called Ivory from Backfist Customs, and when I tell you that this is my most favorite ivory in the world, I'm not even kidding. It is absolutely gorgeous. So drop that on, make sure your glitter is covered, and then we're going to take our hands and with light pressure, we're going to go ahead and wipe the glitter down. You don't have to be super aggressive on this part. You're not trying to like really wipe it all off of your tumbler. Basically what you're doing is you're laying the glitter flat so that it gives like this really nice, just soft shimmer to it. You'll see it. It's just so pretty. So go ahead and lay that all the way down, get into all those little crevices. We're going to make sure we're taking a minute here to wipe off all of that loose glitter. That way this next step is going to be a bit easier. If I'm working with a handle or any type of tumbler that have grooves in it that I need to make sure everything is covered, I will take a thin paintbrush, this one's a little feathered, and I make sure I get right into all those little kind of edges and crevices and make sure that there's no loose glitter there, and then I'll wipe off anything else that still may be on the tumbler. Now this is gorgeous as it is, but I really wanted to give it a second coat. We're going to go straight on with more Aleene's, and look guys, I don't know if y'all saw that TikTok, but when I first started this, I couldn't get the, it was plugged and I couldn't get it undone. And then when I thought I got it undone, it glopped everywhere. So I just scooped that off, put it back into my container, and then I had a ton on my tumbler. So it was actually pretty easy. Whenever you're doing the second step of adding this foiling glue on here or tack it, you're going to use more than you used the first time. The glitter really tends to soak it up, so expect to use more if you're doing a second layer. The only reason I am doing a second layer is just because I wanted a deeper ivory. Other than that, this would have been great the way it, you know, just with one, no one would have even known, but I really just love the way it looked with 2 coats. So after that's spread on completely, I'm going to do the same thing and quickly hit it with a heat gun. And not for long, not too much heat. And I really can't stress that enough because you don't want that glitter or anything to get messed up. So once you get that to the tacky state, you're going to go ahead and drop your ivory or whatever glitter you use and drop your glitter on it again. Whenever you go to put this glitter down, you can feel if it's not ready yet, if some areas are still a little wet and they haven't quite became tacky, because your glitter will feel cold in a certain spot. And there's not really another way I can explain it besides that. You'll run your finger over it and you'll get to a patch where it feels a little like slightly thicker, but it'll have like a cold feeling to it. If you get to that spot, then just hit that spot with a heat gun to help dry that a little and then keep going. Keep in mind that if you do hit that and you're using, you know, a glitter that's great for tack, a really fine glitter, it's going to be messy. Like you're going to kind of blow that glitter off. So just keep that part in mind. Once you get everything on there, go ahead with your finger like we did before, and we're going to lay all of this glitter down. So take your time, go through and make sure it just lays down nice and even, just like we did before. Once I got close to the end of laying that down, I once again took my paintbrush and I went right into the edges and I knocked off any little glitter that may have been stuck in there, just to make sure I'm not going to have anything loose when it's time for epoxy. And guys, I mean, just look at this glitter. I can't. It's so pretty. Like, it's just something about it. It's like like ivory champagne vibes. It's just gorgeous. We're going to go ahead and put down a layer of fast cure epoxy. Stop your tumbler when you're doing a handle. Take your time, get your handle done first, and then I always do under the handle and then about a finger's length on each side. I found that it's a lot easier to get that part done first instead of chasing your handle around in a circle. As long as you get it on that part when it's stopped, you'll be able to turn your turner on and not have that epoxy kind of run all over the place. Like, it's not going to start dripping all crazy. So take your time, turn it off, and get that done. Once you have your epoxy spread on all over the place, go ahead and get your torch, pop any bubbles. Again, gentle with your torch because you don't want to get that glitter warmed up too much. This muted brushstroke vinyl is just so pretty. It's semi-transparent, so everywhere that looks bright white is actually going to be the glitter. I'm trimming off the edges, that way when I line it up to my tumbler, I'll have a more accurate sizing. Next, I'm just going to stand up my vinyl and give myself a little mark of where the top of the tumbler mug is. That way I can get the strip that will perfectly fit around this tumbler. I'm going to trim that down and put the rest aside. We're going to apply this vinyl with the hinge method. That's where we take a little corner of it, trim it away, that way we can stick that part to our tumbler. Before I put that on my tumbler, it's not quite in place yet. You can see I'm kind of pulling it away. I'm going to put the paper straight around there and make sure it's going to line up a bit nice. Once I get close to the handle, I'm going to put that just right up against the handle, and I'm going to take my craft knife and kind of carve out where I want the handle to go. Once I get a little slit, I'm going to pull that back, stretch it out just a tad, and lay that flat against the tumbler. We're going to switch to the other handle, do the same thing so we can that other piece to lay flat. Now be careful when you're doing this that your knife doesn't go too deep and you cut into your handle. Once I get that in place, I pushed my vinyl down against the bottom of where that handle meets the tumbler, and I trim around it just in a circle to get the excess vinyl off of the tumbler. And you just do little slits and you can really carve out just a perfect little circle. Once I get everything carved out appropriately and all around that handle is set, I'm going to flip the tumbler around just a little to get to the underside of that handle to make sure that it's done on both sides. Once I liked how that was laid, I went ahead and flipped it around once again, and I worked on getting my little slit for where the handle needs to fit on the next part of it. As of right now, when I'm doing this part right here, the vinyl is still attached to the backing. I did not peel that off yet. We're just going to give ourselves a tiny little slit in each side. That way it will lay flat and it will go on a lot smoother whenever I wrap this around. I'm also looking at where the brush strokes are going to line up. There's a very dark part in the vinyl right here, and I wasn't loving how the color kind of fell together on the piece that I'm going to be laying down next. Since this has such a dark line that ends right there, there was a really white strip where it's like almost peekaboo, and when it laid down, it didn't make sense. Like it almost showed a seam that didn't exist. I don't know, it's really weird. It's hard to explain. I could have just left it and covered it up with some glitter that I'm going to be doing in the next step, but it was much easier to just remove it. So just a little slit, do not cut through your glitter at this point, and remove those little pieces of vinyl. To go ahead and apply this to the tumbler, we're going to push that backing out just a little, and then as I turn this in the circle, the backing just removes itself. So just go little at a time, push your fingers from the middle and outwards, and keep rotating your tumbler until this little piece works itself all the way off. Once that was all on smooth, I went ahead and got my craft knife and I went around the handle just like I did before and cut out the little pieces that were laying up against it so it wouldn't be traveling up the handle. I then took my craft knife and went around the top of the tumbler and removed the little bit that was sticking up. I did put this down on an angle, that way I would have a really smooth line and my rim would show. This little cup edger that I'm using right here is from Cowbell. It's a great little tool, but with the handle, it doesn't connect all the way around. So I had to take my craft knife and just go through and remove that little strip right there. This little bottle that I'm filling up, I got on Amazon, little needle tip bottles, and I'm just putting some Mod Podge in there so I can go on for this next step of applying the glitter. Now, if you ever meet my mother, fuss at her, because once again, she decided to show up and start talking to me, and I paused it to listen to her, and I forgot that I paused it when I started dropping some of that brown glitter. So here we go. We went ahead and did Mod Podge in little streaks, and I'm brushing this off because this is when I looked up and I was like, oh my goodness, I wasn't recording. So I have the needle tip bottle, and I'm going in little like sketchy zigzag type lines, I guess is how I can explain it to you. If there's an area that I thought brown would look really good accented, I went ahead and I added it on top of brown lines and into any random spots that I was like, oh my gosh, brown would be really pretty if it was here too. So this is just kind of what you want to do on your own. Go free with it, but remember to show a little restraint. Like there's a level to stop yourself and to know when to walk away. So just keep that in mind because there's more colors that we're going to put on. We don't want to overdo it. All the glitters I'm using are from Create by Firefly and they're all super gorgeous. You'll notice that I'm rotating between putting down the glue and dropping the glitter. My reason for doing that is that Mod Podge dries super fast, and if you were to go through and put your glue all the way around, by the time you went to drop your glitter, some of that glue would be dried. So just go in little sections a little at a time, and that will also help to make sure you don't completely overdo it. Once all of that brown was in place, I did walk away for a minute to let it dry, and then I went back and took a feathered paintbrush and I lightly dusted off any loose glitter. A little hint for being able to tell whenever that Mod Podge is dry, that glitter will feel really hard to the touch. So once that was all dry, I went ahead and took my paintbrush, dusted off any loose glitter, and went on with the next color. Now I am going darkest to lightest with these colors. I would rather my light color fall into a dark glitter as opposed to, a big speck of brown being caught in like the pretty light green that's going to go on here. So again, I'm going with my Mod Podge. I'm going to give myself a little streaks, drop on this darker green. It's called Northwood Forest, and then I'll keep rotating until I'm happy with how this glitter looks. Next, you're going to go ahead and get a piece of parchment paper and lay down some of this glitter. They don't have super chunky pieces in here, but compared to the other glitters we're using, it is a few thicker flakes in there, and we don't want those to get loose. So gently tap them down in place to make sure that they're really laying down into that glitter. Once that is all the way dry, I take my little paintbrush and I'm going through again and just dry brushing off any loose glitter. Oh, and a little tip for you guys, the handle. You'll notice that the handle right here, some glitter is kind of stuck to it. My handle, although it was cured, it was like glossy, so like fresh epoxy. So some of the glitter did kind of get caught to it and it was a little tougher to wipe off. If I would have sanded that handle first, it would have been a lot easier to clean that off. And I'll show you later how we're going to clean that up. But a little tip, you can sand the handle, but do not sand the rest of your tumbler because the wrap, that epoxy will go dull under that wrap. So, all right, on with this next glitter. We're going to go with these little brush strokes, add this on here, drop the glitter, and keep rotating until you're happy with it. The glitter we're using for this one is also from Create by Firefly, and this one is called Lamb's Ear. I had to think about that for a minute. Guys, when it was falling out, like my mouth was open. It's just so pretty. Definitely go check out this one. It's such a pretty soft green. Same as always, once that's dry, take your brush and go ahead and wipe off the loose glitter again. All right, same process for the last glitter on this tumbler. This one is called Peach Kiss, and it is this really vibrant, shimmery peach. It's just gorgeous. Go ahead and alternate your Mod Podge and your Peach Kiss. Drop it on. Make sure once it's dry, you're going to wipe everything off. So get your little paintbrush and get rid of anything loose that may be laying on there. This is where I said that the glitter was a little stubborn and got stuck to the handle. So I took my craft knife and I went through and just kind of scraped it off. This craft knife is super dull, so I didn't have to worry about it really damaging the handle in any sort of way. It was just enough to kind of flick that glitter off of there. Once that was off the handle, I took this brush and I went really, really well through it and made sure all the glitter was off. I didn't seal it. I knew I was going straight on to epoxy, so I needed to make sure that there wasn't anything loose on there. So really take your time with that step. We're going to go on with our handle again, put our layer of epoxy on there first, and then go ahead and turn our turner on, get this epoxy around there, torch to pop any bubbles. This is a step where I start making sure for here on out that any epoxy that I put down, my rims come out super clean. So I have my fingernail, there's some rubbing alcohol on this dry baby wipe, and I just have my fingernail on there and I'm pushing that epoxy back and give myself a clean rim at the bottom. Once that's done, I move to the top and I do the same thing with the fresh side of the baby wipe. I push that epoxy back to make sure that not only do I have a clean seal around that top stainless, that I don't have any epoxy dripping into the inside of the tumbler. All right, I could have just left it like this and I would have been happy, but I don't know. We needed a decal, so let's go on to the next step. Also, ignore the handle right here. For some reason, I thought maybe green would be a better choice, so I did green and then I ended up stripping it later, so ignore that. So I have my decal, we're putting it in place. I have my foiling glue right here, and I'm going to go ahead and put it around my decal. You can see that I trim my decal down to size so that I can try to get this kind of in the right spot, and I would know where this glue needs to go. I didn't want to just glue that whole background to do this next step. I kind of wanted an outline. So once that was down, I went ahead and I wiped off this Mama decal, that way it wouldn't be sticky later, and it just came right off with rubbing alcohol. If you are rubbing off any decals, please be careful. Some prints do not like acetone or rubbing alcohol, and I can't stress that enough. Test your vinyl first. If you just take alcohol to certain vinyls, you will wipe away all the color and you'll be left with the white vinyl sheet. So don't do that, okay? Check it first. So I have this foiling glue, and I'm kind of doing the little brush stroke type look, but I'm making sure that this foiling glue gets down all around that section. It's hard to see right now where the outline of that decal went, but you could kind of see it when I was working on it up close. Also, you'll notice I'm taking my lid off right now. I did put my lid on to help me line up my decals. No matter what and how hard I try, I always feel like I struggle with mugs. So to make sure that I get my decal on centered properly, I go ahead and put the lid on. It helps me line it up. Okay, so white foil. My whole reason for putting down that foiling glue right now is that I needed a bleach spot, and I didn't want to do kind of the standard bleach spot with paint since it's kind of a brush stroke tumbler. I wanted to use white foil. That way it would give me kind of a foil brush stroke type look behind the decal. Once that glue got to a tacky state, I went ahead and put the foil down, and I started out with my fingernails and it needed to be a little more aggressive, so I grabbed the squeegee to put that down. I noticed that a few spots needed more, so I went ahead and added a little more glue to, I think, pretty much the whole area, and then it definitely needed the heat gun for this. Be careful when you're using the heat gun because at this point you have epoxy on there and you don't want to heat up that epoxy. So use it just enough to get that glue to a tacky state. From there, you can go ahead and do another layer with that foil. And actually, if you need more after this, you can do as many layers as you need to get that color what you need. The more layers you do, the more intense that will be. So like with that first layer of foil, it kind of had, you could see the color behind it. But the more that I put this white foil on, the whiter that bleach spot got. I hope that makes sense. So get that on there, squeegee it all out. And once you get to the point that you're happy with, we're going to start lining up our decal. Once again, my lid is in place and I am just holding this down. The backing is still on my decal. I don't have it removed yet. I have rubbing alcohol and I'm going to go ahead and start using that to take away some of that foil that I put on so I can contour that bleach spot to, I guess, kind of like accentuate the decal, if that makes any sense. I didn't want to see just a ton of white behind there. I did want some of the brush strokes to peek through, but it's kind of hard to see where they would land without the decal on there. So kind of holding it up against it first gives you a really good idea of where it needs to go. Be somewhat careful with that rubbing alcohol because you don't want to damage that epoxy or take away any color if you haven't tested out your decal. The Firefly prints, I have so far used rubbing alcohol, and I did use acetone on one and it didn't take the color off, but I'm not making that promise for every single decal she has. Test them on your own. So I went ahead, I'm going to do the hinge method. I cut off the back of this just a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and line this up. And guys, I could do this part right here 100 times for 5 hours each, and I would still feel like it didn't go on right. I don't know what my deal is with handles, but I promise you, I don't know, I struggle. I struggle so bad at finding this center. It's a little ridiculous. So anyway, enough about that. I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, hinge method, go from the middle, push it outwards, get that all on. Once that was on, I went ahead and covered this with the back of that paper so I can go ahead and squeegee it on. I'm aggressive, and I know that if I would have took the squeegee right to the decal, I would have probably left blue streaks all over it. So I needed to be a little careful. So then I went around the top, and any spots that looked like they were way too far out of place, I went ahead with my rubbing alcohol and baby wipe, and I kind of removed those. I am going to caution you, be careful whenever you're removing this because some of that foil, it will get white. I don't know how to say this. It comes off, but it doesn't come off in like foil streaks. It comes off as if it's like a type of paint or something. And it will like really lightly be on whatever you're wiping it off with. And if you smudge that onto your decal, you could have a problem getting it off. But since this decal is okay with alcohol, it wasn't a problem just cleaning it up. So go ahead and finish contouring that. And then when you're done, leave the alcohol alone. Okay, so this is where I started looking at it and I was like, maybe I don't like the green. So I went to bed. that was it. I went to bed. The next morning I woke up and I didn't like it. So I stripped the handle, I set it with a layer of epoxy, and I was like, I think what it needs is finishing tape. So I have this finishing tape right here. I got this from Nola Supply Co. back when they were Mr. Nola Glitter. I don't know if they still carry it, but I did find some on Amazon and I did put it in my Amazon storefront, and it's all linked in the descriptions along with all the other supplies. So here's the one thing about this tape right here. I really do love these tapes. Amazon calls them nail striping tapes. The only thing with these glitter ones is that they don't stick as well as some of the metallics do. So I'll show you a little trick to that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm pulling it around the tumbler. If you pull this too tight, it will shrink up once it lays down completely, especially once it gets to epoxy. It will lift and it will shrink up a little. So don't pull it super tight, lay it down flat as you go. And then whenever you get to the spot where the two edges are going to meet up, you're going to overlap it just a tad and cut it so that it overlaps. That way they hold each other down. Press that down insanely good, and then go ahead and run your hand in a circle and make sure you're really pressing that on all the way in there. Once that was done, I went ahead and turned it to the bottom and I did the same thing. Run it around in the circle. I do have this up just a little bit from where the bottom of that epoxy is. That way it doesn't cross the line of where that epoxy is going to be sealed. That way when I get the bottom on here, I can still bring that to a nice clean seal, like a seam, and it won't stick outside the epoxy, if that makes any sense. So like I said, wrap this around, not too tight, let it overlap, and then go ahead and cut that piece off. After that, rub your hand all the way around it and make sure that's all really adhered to the tumbler as well. I'm going to tell you right now, those seams are still going to want to come loose, and I started to notice that, so I took a little bit of UV resin, and this is when I started to get smart. I went ahead and coated that little seam on both ends to make sure that it didn't come loose, and then I hit it with this little flashlight. You can use a regular UV lamp. I didn't go all that long. It was just enough to get it to tack down. And then when I was looking at it, you could see some of the areas where I stripped that handle when it was green. And it wasn't, I mean, it came out, I was impressed. It came out fairly clean, but there was still some spots where you can tell something was up. So the way that I played it off and added a little bit of extra detail was I took this little striping tape and I went around that handle where it kind of, where the handle meets the tumbler, if that makes any sense. To start it off, since this is all curved, it was so difficult. You can see it really good right here. I put down a little UV resin. I hit it with the light enough to get it tacky and not set, but soft enough to where I can wedge that down there and really have this glittered stripe in there and where it wasn't going to move. And then it made it much easier to lay it in place. Once that was all down on both sides, I hit it with the covered it with UV resin, and then I hit it with the UV light again to make sure that it was cured. This time I did go a little longer, but since I've been using a fast setting epoxy throughout this whole process, I was cautious to not go too long because I didn't want to turn anything yellow. And that's only happened to me one time with a bright white glitter, so I just messed that up. I was really, really happy with how those stripes came out, so we went ahead and left it like that. Before I do epoxy on the sides, I'm going to go ahead and do the bottom. I always like to do my bottom and get that out the way. That way, if I were to mess up anything, it wouldn't kind of jeopardize the final product. So this, I have mixed in just some fast cure epoxy, and I added some of that ivory glitter to it. I will be honest with you guys, I don't love how the bottom came out. It is possible to remove this if I wanted to. I would just have to chisel out a little epoxy on it, hit it with the heat gun, and you can pop it out. I don't know if I'm going to do that yet. I need a minute. I just need a minute to think about it because I don't quite know. It's not horrible, but I don't love it either. So I got that in. I hit it with the torch to pop any bubbles, heat gun to make sure it's level, cleaned up my rim around the sides, and then I wanted a little extra glitter in there, so I grabbed this rose gold glitter and I sprinkled some in here, and this is where I was like, I don't know if I like it. I think maybe I could have done that brush stroke on the bottom to just give it something a little more pretty, but I don't know. I didn't do it. I don't know what I was thinking this day. I don't know. I didn't do it. So I dropped some glitter. Once that was all in place and it cured, I went ahead and put a layer of UV resin over this so that I could put my name on there without that glitter kind of giving any texture to it. You can see I just wiped that down as I always do. And then I went ahead, cured that. I put my name on top. I went ahead and coated that in UV resin, spread it out to make sure it's nice and even. got my dry baby wipe with rubbing alcohol and went ahead and cleaned off the rim, and I set that for about 6 minutes. All right, and to finish up the tumbler, I have this fast cure epoxy that I'm putting on here first. It's stopped so I can get my handle done nice and clean. This is going to get a total of 2 layers of epoxy. This first layer right here is going to be fast cure epoxy, and then after this completely sets, I'm going to give it a very light sand, and then I'm going to go on with Artist Cure epoxy. I really like Artist Cure epoxy as a final coat because it does have a little longer life of protecting that yellow over time, and the shine that it gives off is just absolutely gorgeous. As always, through every step, I'm taking care of my rims of the tumbler to make sure those come out really clean on the top and bottom because we don't want to have any issues with it not being sealed properly. And that is it, guys. Again, I think this one is just so pretty. All of these supplies are available over at Create by Firefly, so go check them out. Again, please subscribe, like this, comment, all of those good, happy things, because I really love your support and I appreciate it so much. So I hope you like this tutorial, and I have another fun one coming up for next week, so you guys stay tuned, and I will see y'all soon.